All right, welcome everyone. This is the Indigenous Food Sovereignty webinar. We're really excited to have you all here with us today. Um, Before we begin, as is proper protocol, I would like to offer Elder Edna, Cherilyn, and Jess this tobacco. I have this little tobacco tie here. And I just want to offer this so that we can all have a beautiful discussion today. And I just really want to thank each of you for being here and being willing to share your story and your wisdom with us. We are so grateful to all of you. So thank you. For those of you who have in the room who have a smudge nearby or who would like to smudge, please feel free to do so. I know Jess was setting one up. And I would now like to invite Elder Edna to start us off in a good way with an opening prayer. So Edna, take it away.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Edna. Thanks for starting us off in a lovely way. It's always so great to start off with so much intention from such a grounded place. So thank you so much. Obviously, I'm offering this tobacco virtually, but I will be getting tobacco to you in person at the end of next month when we see you at the Chisel Symposium.
Right.
To continue here with our opening protocol, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. So Alberta Recreation and Parks Association would like to acknowledge the First Nations, the Métis, the Inuit, and all of the people across Alberta who share a history and a deep connection with this land. We dedicate ourselves to moving forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. And one thing that we've learned from many different elders over the years is just how important it is to acknowledge where you are, where you're from, the land that you're on, and the history behind it. I'd like to acknowledge that I am a settler here. I grew up in Mackinsis in Calgary, but I'm currently living in Amiskwaciy, Waskahikan in Edmonton in Treaty 6 territory. And I'm really honored and grateful to call this land home. Some quick introductions. My name is Amelia Grinley. I'm the Program Officer of Healthy Eating and Partnerships with Alberta Recreation and Parks Association and Communities Choose Well. And I'm also your moderator today. This is my first time actually moderating a Choose Well webinar. So I'm both very excited and a little nervous, but mostly just very honored to be here with our lovely guests. And here with me today from our ARPA team is Madison Drader as well, who's the Program Officer of Education and Allyship, who is gracefully helping me behind the scenes with a lot of technology stuff and also helped me a lot to prepare for this webinar. So thanks, Maddie. Happy to have you here. Some quick housekeeping before we get into it. Grab a cozy spot inside or outside, grab a beverage or some food. It is lunchtime, so if you'd like to eat during this webinar, obviously we can't see or hear the participants, so feel free. And feel free to enjoy a snack or a beverage as you are taking in the wisdoms and the knowledges that will be shared today. If you have any questions as the presentation is going, feel free to put them in the chat or into the Q&A box, either or. We will try and answer a couple questions, hopefully near the end. I would also like to note to try to stay until the end of the webinar if you can today, as part of hosting this session in a good way and to honor their traditions. Edna and Cherilyn will be doing a draw prize for one participant to win a gift. So if you're logged in and watching the webinar, your name has already been added to this really fun online spinny wheel that we will be using to do a random name draw at the end for someone to receive a gift. This session is also being recorded and will be sent afterwards out to people if you have to leave partway through and want to watch the rest of it later. In terms of some quick background for our webinar, I want to keep the introductions quick because I want to leave most of the time to, of course, to Jessica and Edna and Cherilyn to share. But this is our first Indigenous Food Sovereignty webinar. And part of the idea for this webinar stemmed from the Indigenous Food Sovereignty e-course that we launched this last year, which was centered around knowledge that we got from interviews with Elder Brenda Rowland, who is actually on this call today. Hi, Elder Brenda. And Carly Crowshoe as well, and Adrienne Goulet and Jessica Smith as well were all instrumental in helping us to shape the content for this e-course. So big thanks to all of them for that. I know I learned a lot throughout the creation of that e-course. And so when Jess nominated Edna and Cherilyn for an award with Choosewell this year for their initiative in the Kikino Métis Settlement, I thought, what better opportunity to give them a platform to share their story and their knowledge with you all, on how they're working towards food sovereignty in their community, and to just deepen all of our knowledge and understanding about food sovereignty together. As part of our work at ARPA and at Choosewell, we are committed to walking with Indigenous communities, and we developed an action map with 10 key calls to action that we are committed to standing on as an organization. And one of them is to educate ARPA members and to protect knowledge and knowledge sharing. So that's part of what we're doing here today. And yeah, I just want to again honor the knowledge and wisdom that Elder Edna, Cherilyn, and Jess are going to share with us today. Introduce them all briefly to you here, because I know you're all keen to hear from the stars of the show. So first we have Elder Edna Desjarlais from the Kikino Métis Settlement. She works with the Kikino Family Resource Network as the Culture Program Navigator. Edna is also super amazingly talented at beadwork. I've seen pictures and it's so, so stunning. We also have Cherilyn Cardinal from the Kikino Métis Settlement. Cherilyn is the network liaison with the Kikino Family Resource Network and also works with the Cancer Prevention and Screening Innovation with Alberta Health Services. She's also a skilled hunter and provides for her family and community in that way, which is so awesome. And it's Edna and Cherilyn's awesome community gardening initiative that we'll be hearing about in the webinar today. We also have Jessica Smith here. She's the executive director of the Elders Knowledge Circle and the Indigenous coordinator of the Cancer Prevention and Screening Innovation with Alberta Health Services as well. Jess is a long time friend of ARPA and Choosewell. She's done a lot of work with us through the Walking with Indigenous Communities programming and was really instrumental, like I mentioned, in shaping the food sovereignty e-course that we created. So grateful to have all three of you with us today. I know that for attendees, we might have a mix of expertise in the room in terms of some of you might have heard of the concept of Indigenous food sovereignty before, some of you might know about that already, and some of you might not. So I'd like to invite Jess to start us off with a bit of an introduction to the topic of Indigenous food sovereignty. And then we'll pass things along to Edna and Cherilyn to share about their community's initiative. So Jess, can you tell us a bit about Indigenous food sovereignty and what that means to you and its significance?
Absolutely. Miigwech, Edna, for the prayer. And it's always good to start us in a good way. It doesn't matter time of day it is, doesn't matter what we've got going on. Taking that moment to honor one another in this space and Creator is necessary for our wellness too. So, Buzu Anin, Indigenaka Nagamoin Mashkada Bijakekwe. So my name is Singing Buffalo Woman. My tax name is Jessica Smith. And my family is from Hiawatha First Nations in Ontario, and my mom's family is from Bayside in New Brunswick. And I was raised up in Halifax and came out to Alberta as a teenager. So I got asked to come in and talk a little bit about food sovereignty. And so first and foremost, I want to ask everyone a question. Just throw it in the chat. What do you think food sovereignty is? And what do you think Indigenous food sovereignty means? And just throw your thoughts in the chat and we can kind of look at that, just to kind of get an idea of where people are at and their understanding. And when I think about food sovereignty, I think about a lot of things. So what does food mean to us? And food is something that sustains us. Food is the animals, the plants, the fungi, it's the water that we consume. It could be unprocessed, it can be processed. There's all of these different ways in which we can look at food and ways in which we consume food. But what has happened to our food systems is an intentional colonization of all aspects of ourselves within the Indigenous communities across Alberta, across Turtle Island. But what we're seeing is that colonization has now bled into food, which has created a lot of disparities that we're seeing. So when we think about the concept of food sovereignty, it's a reclamation of the ways in which we practiced prior to this colonization. It's also quite frankly, a form of resistance. And it's a form of going back into our ways of being and dismantling these colonial practices that are sitting within our communities, both in rural settings, on nation, on settlement, and in urban settings. And so I think what's really important to understand is when we think about food sovereignty, it's looking at what are the current issues that are faced. So we face poverty. We're facing a poor access to healthy quality food in communities. We're facing an inability to sometimes access our traditional ways of gathering food. And these are imposed in a lot of different ways when we look at certain laws that are in place as it relates to clean drinking water, certain hunting rights, depending on if you're First Nation status, non-status, Métis. There's all kinds of complexities that cause this separation from our traditional ways of being. One thing that I think is really important as well to understand is that food is sacred. Food is seen as a medicine. And so when we look at what wellness is in community, it's directly correlated to food sovereignty, to our connection to that food. You'll hear from Edna and Cherilyn here quite soon on how that looks for them. And some of the things that you're going to hear about is hunting practices. We're not just talking about hunting, we're talking about sustainability. We're talking about how does that show up in community, but also is protective of the land. There are so many components to food sovereignty when you look at the system as a whole. The food, the land, the soil, the water, these things, when we look at them in this Western lens, they're not protected. These are things that are done in an extractive way. But when we look at traditional food systems and traditional practices, they're incredibly sustainable in nature. And so these are kind of all the concepts that I want you to think about when you think about food sovereignty. When we think about Indigenous food sovereignty, that's one way of knowing and being. Sorry, I misspoke. Not one way of knowing and being. There are many nations and communities' approaches to food sovereignty, but it is one knowing as it relates to the entire globe and all of the different ways that different cultures practice food sovereignty. So what we're focusing on here is Kikino's goals around food sovereignty and food sustainability in their communities. I also want to kind of think about, I'll leave you with this last thought around when we think about the success of a community, we have to think about our social determinants of health. And one of those markers is quite literally our physical health, it's our food. And so when we don't have control over our sort of measurements that creates a sustainable community, we see a lot of the issues that we currently face in community. So these are systemic issues that are current problems. So some people, maybe not on this call, but some people sometimes will look at colonization or our systemic issues within communities as a historical thing, which is just not the case. And so we have to unpack all the different layers in which ways that these things show up in community, and so food is one of those. And if we are correlating food as medicine, you can see the direct line to the health disparities within our communities with higher rates of illness, loss of life, younger, and all of those pieces, not to mention a loss of culture when we can't pass on our traditional ways of being. So anyway, I will leave it there for a moment. That's kind of just a high level thought process around food sovereignty and Indigenous food sovereignty. I really encourage you to take the e-course. It's really beautifully done. I did not do that much. I just took a review of it, guys. I take no credit, but I'm going to pass it over to the amazing Cherilyn and Edna. I love these women so much, and I've seen the incredible work they're doing in community. I'm privileged and blessed enough to get to walk alongside them while they do this wicked work. And I'm telling you, beautiful, beautiful. So I say be good hand to heart to each of you, and I hope you have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
She's so nice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, good afternoon. My name's Edna. I am the Culture Program Navigator for Family Resource Network. Also the Elder for the Cancer Research Project with Cherilyn Cardinal. I'll let Cherilyn introduce herself and then we'll start.
Hi, my name is Cherilyn Cardinal. I'm the Community Prevention Health Promotion Coordinator on the Cancer Research and Prevention Project in Kikino. And I work alongside Edna, partnering with our community garden, among many other programs and events that we run in our community.
Okay, so it started out, Cherilyn and the previous lady that was in her position were talking about garden. So then we looked at the possibility of where to put a garden. We looked at our surroundings. We did a little bit of homework, and we found that in the back area of the Family Resource Network, there was a space available. So with that space, plans went in to clear it to make a garden. It sounds easy, but there are things you got to do. You got to look at location. You got to call before you dig. You got to do some homework on water, things that we learned later.
Dirt.
We hauled dirt. So basically, it was just a piece of land that we worked to create a garden.
It was a bush.
End result, it being a fenced-in garden, and that's where we started to plant. We can't take the credit by ourselves. We had community members who were involved. We had our local gentleman here who delivered us dirt. We had family who helped paint, who helped do the fence line for us. We also had, we did a call out to our community for doing the garden itself. To plant the garden, we did a call out inviting people to come join us. And that's how it started out. We got people involved and we planted the garden. The first year, we we planted and we put everything we planted in the language, in English and in our language, which would be Cree. So every line had an item of what it was. We then went from the gardening, we expanded it out to, our goal was to give the elders, actually, in the low income families. That was ultimately the goal. And that's what we did. We harvested the garden, we distributed it to the elders, to the families who needed it. We then went on to can some of that stuff, such as potatoes, carrots, and beets, and we distribute that as well. Our corn the first year did pretty good. We did a call out to the community for the corn. Corn was all picked up in one day. And then last year, Family Resource took over the garden for sustaining it because Cancer Research didn't have the funding. So Family Resource took it over. So me and Cherilyn again partnered up. This year again, last year we planted differently, but same items, just a different location. And second year we learned a lot more. We learned on which ways to plant, what worked, what didn't, when to plant. Our watering system we had to figure out because we were like little ants going up and down a hill. A lot of physical exercise. So we figured out the watering system. We also put a shade down there for the elders, for anybody who joins us. A shelter has been put up there. We've also expanded it to have flower beds down there. So those that want to come check out the flowers, to come sit down there. It's a beautiful area. So not only has it become a gardening area, it has become a community area. And we still hope to expand on that. My goal is to have like a sensory, wheelchair accessible part added onto it. But ultimately, we just plant the garden to feed our community. We've also done some hunting. We both come from a hunting family. Cherilyn is an active hunter. So from the hunting, we ran classes on how to can the meat, how right here in Family Resource Network. We both own smokehouses. So we invited people out. We showed them how to smoke the meat, prep the meat. We took it to our residence. We brought it back and we split it. We then went on to go on to canning. So it just kind of led from one thing into another. So it made us think back of the way we grew up. Like Cherilyn's grandparents were avid gardeners. They had like 4 gardens. We talked about that too, how the elders, how hardworking they were, how much energy it took to feed their family. So that's something we look at each other. We're both still kind of young. Like these elders worked hard, and the elders that joined us worked hard. So we had to work hard too. um, so we went on to expanding it. It just kind of rolled over into canning. We've had canning classes. We've had jam making classes. We went on to do bannock making, how to make bread, preserving our food. Um, I guess the biggest thing, another thing that come out of this was community and family engagement. The families that come out, the families we fed, the families we've transferred the knowledge to. Um, we've had families say, well, you guys have a big garden. Well, we've went on to show them how to plant in pails, how to transplant stuff. So, and Sharon did a video on smoking meat and making meat. So I'll let Sharon talk about that.
Mm-mm.
Sharon's trying to be shy. We know she's not shy.
Nobody believes me. I'm really a shy person. Yeah, but anyways, the smoking meat and the hunting, the best way to, well, our initial idea was to create a self-sustaining community. And we realized that in order to do that, we had to go back to the old ways, the grassroots, the way our grandparents grew up. Like I remember growing up as a kid, my grandparents had a trapping cabin, my cookum had a cellar full of canned stuff, like 4 gardens, completely huge. Like I look at this garden, I'm like, man, we're useless. Because they were out at like 5 in the morning, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not about to do that. But little did I know, me and Edna would be doing that. When we'd get weather for like plus 30 or whatever, we'd come down at 5 or 6 in the morning to water the garden just to get it out of the way. Because, like we said, we were learning. We learned that you can't water the garden in the middle of the day, even though you might want to. You just shouldn't, because they're going to shock the plants. I wouldn't mind shocking the onions because onions are nasty. And yeah, just with the hunting and stuff, like teaching people. All my sister-in-laws came to my brothers with not so many talents when it came to cutting meat. Some of my cousins too. They're like, "Give me meat," and I'm like, "No, you can come learn, and I'll teach you." So I taught a lot of people in this community how to cut meat, which I grew up watching my cookum do, and then learned kind of along the way growing up. I have a 12-year-old daughter who is amazing at cutting meat. And it's just skills and stuff that we need to pass on to our kids, because if we don't keep it going, then it dies with us. Mm-hmm. And it's our Indigenous right to hunt, trap. I don't like fish, but you could do that too.
Yeah, that's key. And when I say family involvement, like Cherilyn's daughter, my grandsons, we just give them the option. We're not forcing them, but they're there to at least look at it and learn. And then from there, that's how I do with my boys. One chooses not to, one chooses to do it. But you have to show others. We have to transfer that knowledge to others to keep this going. Because since we've had our garden, I've noticed in our community, other people have started gardening. More people are disking up. And one of the ladies asked me what a good prize would be for an upcoming event. I suggested give them the option to disc their yard. That's a good gift. Maybe seeds. That's another good gift. So all of our events we tried to plan. We tried to give back as door prizes, as incentives, as something that they can use.
And we had hot dogs.
So we give back things like a rake, stuff that they can use for the garden, something that's tangible that they can take back and they can utilize at home. Ultimately, it is a healthier choice. It's a cheaper choice if you look at it. A little hard work, but the seeds ain't that much. Potatoes ain't that much. So if you can plant your garden, you're going to save so much, and you're going to be able to show your family and transfer on so they know, and then their kids know. The only way we can continue on having our way continue. Indigenous food sovereignty to me is the traditional grassroots levels of learning, the way we grew up. It's our way, I believe, is a little different. It's the food sovereignty in itself, anybody can do that, but our way I find is different because you actively have to go hunt. You actively have to go do the work. We ain't paying anybody to do it.
Respect the land,
You
respect
got to
the
respect the
animals.
land, the animals, and the environment. There's a difference as well too when you talk about indigenous food sovereignty. We give back. You can't just take, and not give back. Protocol needs to be followed as well. One of the things that amazed us when we first did the garden, I laid tobacco down. Cherilyn did too. Two different times. We didn't even know each of the other was doing it. And all we asked was for a good harvest. We ain't asking for miracles. We're just asking for it to grow, for us to learn from it. If it didn't grow this year, we'll work it again. We'll do it next year. So year 3, we're coming up. We're ready for it. We have what we have to get going. All we're going to do is grab some seeds. And we have most of our stuff ready to go. We have dirt. We're going to put in a couple more loads of dirt. We do know the planting of the seeds we're going to do differently this year because last year when me and Cherilyn went into the garden to harvest, we noticed somebody planted twice in the same row.
She had one job.
And it didn't grow. So fortunately, I had seeds at home. I said, you know what? It's still early. Let's replant. And we did. And they grew. So we learn from gardening.
We had carrots. We had beet carrots.
Yeah, we did actually. But it's a learning process. So we know it's like too many cooks in a kitchen, too many gardeners in a garden at planting time. So you kind of have to plan it. You have to really, because this ain't something you can play with. It costs money, and if you have to do it, it's kind of serious too. Like as much as we laugh about it and joke around, it's something that's gonna.
It's hard work.
It's hard work, and it's important. And if you show children the importance of it, they'll understand that as well. What more can I say about the garden? Oh, it makes a big difference if you have partners. Cherilyn partnered up with us at first, and then we partnered up with whoever is willing to join us. We've invited out our community for cleaning. Everybody wants food, but come time to clean the garden, you don't get that many. So we do what we have to do because it benefits all. And it keeps us active. But another good thing that's with me and Cherilyn working together makes a big difference if you like who you work with. If you're able to work with that person, if you're compatible. We joke all the time, we laugh all the time, and that makes the day fun. It makes the gardening process so much easier because it is hard.
Yeah, I had no clue what I was doing when we first planted. There was this lady who did onions, and she's like, "Okay, see you later. I'm leaving." And I was like, "Okay, I know where I got under control." So I went and replanted over her onions, and then I realized when I was hilling them, I'm looking and I see little onion bulbs, and I'm like, I look around, see if anyone's watching me, so I start kicking them. And there's this lady standing there. She's like, "Quit that! Go back to the potatoes." I'm like, I don't want to be here anymore.
So one of the biggest things, the lady that she talks about is an avid gardener. And key thing we also have to mention is when we did a call out to the gardeners. We know who gardens in our settlement. We know who gets a good harvest. So those are the people we called up upon, and they were the elders. And man, they could work. That one lady worked us under the table, man. We just couldn't give up because like she was still there.
Yeah, I was trying to take 5 and she still give her. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go back out there.
So we recruited people that knew what they were doing and that can offer us ideas because we don't have all the answers. We're just learning as well. And every year every time we garden, we're still learning. Like I said, we're not by any means professionals. We're just two local people who wanted to plant a garden and help our community and help our elders. Key was elders for me because they're getting too old to do it for themselves. So one of the key things I want to do is make that our garden wheelchair accessible. So the elders can go down there. They can roll along those beds and work it if they need to, because they're still important to us. They can holler at us at the side there should we need to do something. There's so much more we can learn from them, and so we invite them all.
Yeah, and we had this thing where if we're having a bad day or just bad intentions or just bad vibes all around, we would get it all out of us before we go to the garden. So there was a lot of stuff coming out of us prior to heading down, but once we went in, we're like, okay, if you do things with the right intentions and the right purpose, it usually works out. And that comes from, again, being an Indigenous person. Like when you're cutting meat, you do it with the right intentions to feed people. And when you're hunting, you do it with the right intentions to feed people. You have to do everything with a good heart, and it usually ends up working out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true, because Sherilyn and they killed 2 moose last fall. And she messaged me, and I said, hey, drop me off some moose meat. She goes, it's all gone because we fed it out. We fed the people. And I said, that's the right thing to do. And so when you give meat like that, they got a moose the following week because their intent was good. They fed so many people. And at the price of food, meat, to get moose steak is awesome. And to be gifted it for free as well. It's so awesome when you can eat what you grew, eat what you've hunted, and the skills that you transfer onto your children is key also.
I'm still working on growing a moose. I had a moose in my yard last year and he was thirsty, and I told Edna I'm just gonna water him till fall. She's like, you can't do that. I'm like, but he's thirsty.
I said, that's entrapment. You can't do that.
But it was the right intention and a good heart.
We still argued. We debated about that, and I said, no. I said, real hunter ain't gonna do that. So
his name was Cletus.
I said, plus you're naming him, and it's gonna be hard to shoot him. You do that. So we could joke around like that, and we can laugh. And she did not shoot that moose, and it's just our way. Like I said, I don't know. To me, it's just working the garden. Although we may see humbled by it, it just some the way we grew up.
I underestimated it. I have a newfound respect for my grandparents, because our garden, the one we have down there, my grandparents had 4 of those surrounding their house, and it was just the 2 of them. And I was never allowed in the planting process. It was just the potato picking. And now I get it. They use me. But it's all right.
But you learned, didn't you?
I did.
So all this is a learning component for each other, for our community. We've had people pop in down there when we're working, because we're music people too. The music is cranked up down there. We get people pop by and see us and just talk to us, look at the garden. They'll come back sometimes and grab or ask if we need help. So much respect for the garden. We have nobody bothering it. We hope it continues.
We are growers, not showers.
Any questions?
That's awesome, you two. Yeah, but just to echo Madison's comment, I don't know if either of you are seeing the chat, but yeah, you two bring so much just humor and fun and good energy to the work that you do. You can't, hear us because we're on mute, but I could see all of us like laughing in the background too when you're making your jokes. And thank you so much for sharing about your garden. Maybe I'll ask you a quick question to start off while we're waiting for some other people to put their questions in the chat here. My question is just what's one of your favorite memories from the garden?
Mine was when Edna, we were going down, we seen the tops popping up, so we're like, yeah, and then she goes and she's like, okay, watch this, progress. She pulls it up and the carrot's like that big. And like, okay, put it back. She goes a little further down the line, progress. It's that big again. I was like, okay, just quit.
But they did grow. They did grow bigger.
Oh yeah, they're fat. I'm going to show you guys this carrot.
For me, the biggest moment would be to see it all grown in, to see it all cleaned. It was like, holy mackerels, like we created this. To see it from on top of the hill from our work site, to look down. It was an amazing feeling of a sense of accomplishment, a sense of pride, a sense of community. And so really looking forward to going down there again.
Hold on, let me find this carrot.
Yeah, carrots are kind of deceptive, hey, when they're first growing, because you like see all these greens come out the top and you're like, oh my gosh, they must be ready. And then it takes a little bit for them to fully grow in there. Thank you for sharing your memories from the garden. Yeah, feel free to put questions in the chat. I see a question. Oh, I have a question here from Carrie.
Okay.
They ask, what feedback have you had from your elders?
Nothing but positive, happiness, gratitude was the biggest one. To be given them food that was grown that they didn't have to do was a big thing. Nothing but gratitude, I'd have to say, from the elders.
And a lot of knowledge passed from them on what to do, what not to do. We didn't know that corn has to do this.
Dance around a
Yeah,
little.
we learned that you have to space your corn more. We learned that you have to give them enough room to grow. We learned that they have to be able to move their ears to be able to get the full effect, because when they move, all the stuff comes off of them and helps them grow. Like we learned quite a bit.
Look at my shy carrot.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
She's shy.
You don't see that kind of stuff in the grocery stores either. That is garden carrot material. Yeah, they're not shaped like
I
that.
see another question. It says about how many people did you have working in the garden throughout the season?
It varied.
It varied. Planting year, we had about 15 or to kick off. Periodically, when we cleaned it, we had about 10. It varied each year. Harvest time, though, we had quite a few.
Yeah.
Because we just harvested the potatoes. They would come as soon as we told them it was harvest time. We would have people come bring their own bags, come get the potatoes. So we got most probably at harvest time.
Yeah, it's a satisfying time of year to be able to reap the benefits of everything that you sowed in the garden.
Minus the onions, yep.
Minus the onions.
What should we use to get the youth involved? This year we just did a call out. We had youth come. This year. The parents and grandparents sent them down. Go down to the garden and tell them we want potatoes and carrots. So they did come down and tell us how to set it. Well, there's the garden. Pick them. So they did. So those youth were very, very happy that they were taking home bags of stuff. So we said, okay, give to your grandma, give to your mom, give to your auntie, whoever needed it. And if you guys run short, come back. So they took their stuff and then they came back.
The boys, I just made them come. My son has a group of friends that hang out at my house every day. So if they want to do something, they're going to come water the garden and help.
Yeah.
They
So
didn't really have a
family.
choice.
We recruited some family, and they're just youth that like her kids, our kids. We just, if they come on down, like I said, I think music is a big factor. When you have music cranked out in the community, they're wondering where it's coming from. So they come down to the garden and check us out.
Yeah, we actually had people from young and old. We had my nephew, he was 1, walking around eating everything till I kicked him out.
I think in an urban setting, I would go with more with planting
Raised
beds, or potato pail planting, because you can get at least 10 pounds of potatoes from a pail if you plant. So I would recommend go that way, because that was one of the things that we were told. Oh, we don't have a big fancy garden. So we adapted their question to pail planting. We showed them how to transplant strawberries. So then we went from the strawberries to canning strawberries to making jam. It just kind of just rolls. Yeah, we did seed sowing too with the elders and community on what we need to start early. We actually had a lady last Friday tell us, okay, girls, you need to start your tomatoes in March. She started telling us, you didn't want to tell her we're not doing tomatoes. We're
corn.
We're going to probably stick to the general stuff that we're used to doing. I wouldn't mind to try turnips. I know a couple elders asked for turnips because they make like mashed potatoes, carrots, and turnips. And in our language, we call it suega, and it's a mixture. So they asked about that. So I said, well, maybe we'll try some turnip.
Amazing. And just to, because did you want to speak to that urban context a little bit more too when it comes to food sovereignty and what people can do in their own communities?
Sure. So back in my youth programming days, we did some food sovereignty in an urban setting. Um, there's a couple things I wanted to speak to through the question. So getting youth involved, it's different in every community, right? In the space in my previous work, it was really first and foremost relationships, like with the young people. So we had young people who already maybe had a connection to the program, or to another youth who is a part of the program, or maybe to one of us directly. Um, or maybe their parents heard about it, and so the kids came moaning and groaning, and then they realized it's a ton of fun to get their hands in the dirt, right? So I would say that's usually what I find to be the biggest is like youth buy-in comes from connection, and there's just like any other thing that comes from it, they oftentimes, if there's trust there, they'll show up. And then you're looking at how do we reduce some of the barriers that youth might face to be able to access what it is that you're doing. So some of the things we would do is like provide transportation or meet them at the bus stop or different things like that. Just getting really creative with the ways in which you understand your youth circumstances and those kinds of things. And then in an urban setting, like it you have your own challenges because a lot of the times, it's an organization running the gardening program, or maybe don't have the ability to go to the community, or to council and say, hey, can we use this chunk of land to actually grow a garden, like Edna and Cherilyn had. So like one of the things that we did a couple different things. So the first iteration of like building out a food, more just a connection. I called it food sovereignty, but at that time we were just exploring the concept of what that even was. And so we accessed actually a micro grant through Communities Choose Well, and we purchased a grow tower essentially, and it's an indoor hydroponic garden. And so one of the really cool things is some of the science that you get to explore as it relates to that. And so we taught our young people how to how to cross pollinate, their tomatoes or their cucumbers or things that you couldn't normally grow indoors, because of you don't have pollinators inside. And then we grew things that didn't need that pollination as well. But we taught them about it. We taught them how to mix the fertilizer appropriately for the water and on and on. What kept the young people engaged was the food and getting to eat, right? Like, who doesn't love that? So we did a few things. I was lucky enough that one of my facilitators used to be a chef. And so I was like, okay, you take all this yummy food and actually cook with the kids, and then they can take some of that food home to everybody. So we did these cool pantry programs. We did budget meals. We had families come in and judge their food like a contest. And we did a cool like bunch of different stuff like that, so that they actually understood the effort that went into growing the food, the effort that went into preparing the food, and then of course the reward of eating the food. So I think some of the other things that we did to kind of engage people, was actually going and putting a call out looking for somebody who wanted to let us garden on their land. And so we had this beautiful Métis elder, and her name is escaping me. I apologize. It was quite a while ago now. And anyway, her and her husband donated their garden to us, and it was just in her backyard. And we had elders come out, and we did offering of some tobacco. We actually put tobacco in the 4 directions of the garden, blessed that land. And then when we planted everything, the elder that we had out talked a little bit about the life cycle of some of the plants that we were planting, some cool teachings around the 3 sisters, if you know that story, and different just engaging things that one was physical activity and then connection. So there were some memories that were had there. And then we would make, each time we went out fun. Sure, we're weeding the garden, but like we're having good laughs, we're spending time with one another, we're out in the sun, different things like that. But the biggest thing is it was a slow build of introducing the young people to these concepts, and then over time expanding on that. We actually didn't have a lot of success with utilizing a community garden. And I don't know if I'll get into all of the details as to why, but sometimes, when an Indigenous youth group goes out, there's preconceived notions about who our young people are, and they're often not rooted in truth. And so we had a community garden plot, and at some point while we weren't there one day, they took all of our food out. And so we decided to move away from that scenario, because stereotypes and layers of nonsense happens a lot. And so we got creative with putting that call out and having a garden that we could go to. And then we ended up actually giving a big chunk of the food that we grew to the elders who hosted us for the summer. And then the rest, we also did some preservation around canning and different things like that. But we had quite an abundance. So each of the families that were a part of it got to take fresh food home. There was, throughout the season, you have different harvests for different plants. We got to do all that as well. And I would say that the other question around sort of initiating in an urban setting is creativity. Edna, you hit the nail on the head when you said like container gardening, things like that. Small, sustainable projects, because sometimes people think gardening, for example, is really overwhelming. And it can be if you are like, here's this giant plot. We're going to spend all day tilling, then we're going to spend all day sowing some seeds, and then we got to be here every day to water and weed. Like, that's very overwhelming. But if you start small and like somebody gains that reward and that knowledge, suddenly you have a whole group of gardeners, right? The same goes for processing animals. My husband and I also, we've been preserving our own meat since we've been together. We've been together 10 years now. And so for us, there isn't another way of life. But I have brought people into that before, and it's stressful for them. They don't realize that the work that it takes to take and break down an animal. And so you have to do these things in time. It takes time to build that connection to those things, especially young people. Some of the ways that we have engaged youth in meat processing would be I used to do some youth camps as well, and we take about 40 kids out to the bush where there's no service, and that's a ton of fun because kids, they spend their first day withdrawing from their cell phones, and then the next thing they know, oh, look, there's this whole playground out here, and we can just engage one another and have a good time. So one year we had so our friends at the Alberta Bison Ranch, I'll call them out because they're lovely, they gave us quite a discounted rate on a bison. Let's be real, that's a very expensive meat. But they also gifted us all of the other aspects of the animal that we utilize. So the hide, the skull, the organs, all these different things, without charging us for that harvesting of those things. They just gifted it to us, and in addition to the meat. So all we had to pay for was the meat and at a discounted rate. And again, that's through relationships. And I won't stress that enough. Like, relationships is where change happens. Sorry, I'll make this quick. So what we did is half of the animal, my husband and I broke down and created a webinar for ARPA on how to process that animal. And then the other chunk of the meat we took out to camp because we had a big enough fridge to keep it stored. And we engaged the young people in making dry meat, in kind of some of the different tools that can be made out of the animal. we processed the hide for the youth program to have as for ceremony. And then we did all of these other activities that related to not just preserving the meat, packaging, et cetera, but everybody got to go home with bison. So we had 40 kids, 40 families. I don't know how many people that fed, but everybody got, 15, 20 pounds of meat, which is a fair bit of meat. And then they got to go home and be really proud of all of those things. So yeah, connection is where it's at. And the last thing I'll share around harvesting animals, because we get a lot of flack in our community for harvesting meat in traditional ways, especially from folks who maybe don't understand or, have their own beliefs around food. And I don't think that's a fair judgment to pass, because when we think about access to food, if we didn't have the Cherilyn's in community, how many people wouldn't eat? And so I always respect people's beliefs, right? I always respect people's beliefs, especially when it comes to eating for whatever reason, if it's religious, if it's a moral thing for themselves. But I also ask that we have that same respect, because sometimes we don't understand that there's a whole lot more that goes into harvesting an animal than just taking an animal's life. And no one gets to judge us for how that happens, because I'll tell you, in all the years that I've harvested my own meat, those animals' lives are good until the end. And a lot of the times the meat that we get in the grocery store, they didn't have the best of lives. And so I would say that there's a very different relationship to the animal that is harvested by our own hands than the animal that maybe you receive from the grocery store. And again, no judgment. Not everybody can do or has the skills to harvest, but I think it's a really important thing to understand. And that's why we build that connection with young people as well, so that they are connected to that animal and not just mindlessly consuming something. Yes, exactly, Brenda. Because when we mindlessly consume, we don't understand the harm that we're causing. But if we are mindful and we're there with that animal and their life, when we harvest that vegetable, we harvest that fruit, we're there till its last life. It's medicine. We've offered to that. We've asked for it to sustain us, and that's reciprocity, right? What are we doing to sustain Mother Earth? Right? Cherilyn's out walking on the land. She's out there making sure that the way in which that she takes an animal's life is not taking from it. So there's only a certain time that she's hunting. She's not hunting, an animal that has a young, different things like that isn't always thought about. So anyway, I'll stop there. Sorry. I
I
just
think
thought it was really important to say that as
I
well.
think that's
So
where we separate Indigenous food sovereignty, when we hunt and we go do our things by seasons as well. That's a big
Yeah.
difference.
And I know, like, when I don't even know how to say it, like the tags, when they're giving cow tags, I don't like it. I just my personal opinion and belief, I don't like it. I don't like that they're giving cow tags every year to hunt, because they're the breeders. A cow can throw 2 or 3 moose that will keep feeding people.
Okay, we're getting close to the end. I just want to show a couple of quick photo. I don't know if you can see it, but here's a photo of how it started off with just a piece of land. There's nothing, right? And the end result, this is the end result. This is how the garden looked after. I don't know if you can see it. You'll probably see it in the conference.
Yeah.
But see how from a piece of land that went that way. So that is still what the same garden we're using. The same thing we want to do. I said maybe add in some turnips. We know our game plan. We know all that. So just a matter of planting. We're happy for the opportunity to share. It's just stuff that we do in our community, stuff that we learning about, and something that we can give back to all our community as well.
About those stereotypes, Jess, I bet you guys are all thinking, oh, they're probably just awesome and amazing. And you're right. You're right.
That's the end of the story. Yeah. Oh, thank you all so much. This is so lovely. I feel like, yeah, just hearing the story of the garden and how you literally started from scratch and made that beautiful place for the community to connect, to eat good food that's grown in a good way with good energy. And I feel like what I'm really taking away from it today is that like connection and that relationship building piece, like the relationship with the land, the animals, the plants, relationships with our elders and our youth and the community members. Is such an important part of that food sovereignty discussion too.
It's a knowledge transfer, and our elders are our storybooks. Once they die, their stories and their skills and teachings go with them. So it's something that we need to carry on, because one day I want to be a cook. Not any day soon, but one day. And I want my grandkids to know how to do all of this.
Exactly.
Because I don't know where baloney lives in the bush. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and hearing about like all the teaching of the food literacy and where those food actually come from is so important for our youth to know too.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for joining us.
Yeah, thank
Have
you.
a good day, guys. Thank you
See
so
you
much.
guys next month.
Yeah.
See you in Calgary.
Symposium in March. Bye,
Okay.
everyone.
Later.